After the thunderous storm of rumors that has been persisting for the past couple of weeks about many Mario games coming to the Nintendo Switch this year, both new and old, I thought it was finally time that I talk about one of them in depth. This being the rumored remaster of Super Mario 64. If you were to ask me what one video game in particular was that had a massive impact on my life, what game do I just love playing the most? And near or at the top of that list would definitely be Mario 64. I have so many fond memories of playing it alongside the DS remake that just make me so excited for the possibility of it getting remastered this year. I think it's extremely likely at this point, considering that in my previous video I went over all the sources and they're pretty reputable and strong, so I have no reason to expect them not to be releasing this year. And if Mario 64 is going to be coming out this year, then I believe that some changes are in order. You see, when you replay Mario 64 or the DS remake to this day, I believe they're fantastic, but they definitely have their aging problems, as does pretty much every game. And I don't believe Mario 64 has aged that bad. I could still go back and play it to this day and have some enjoyment in it, but there are definitely some changes that need to be made in order to allow this game to have the same magical experience on a modern audience as it did on me. You see, if Nintendo's remastering Mario 64 and all these other games, the people who've played those games before that are playing the remasters are likely playing it because they enjoyed it before, and they're going to be pleased with the result pretty much no matter what. As long as Nintendo doesn't mess with the structure too much, I'm sure people are going to be having a blast with games that they have a ton of nostalgia for. But the people who are really important in this situation are those who haven't played these games before. People likely of a younger demographic who haven't experienced Mario 64 Sunshine or Galaxy, and because of how high quality the games are, with a few modernizations, can still have that same large impact on a new generation. Today I'll be going over 10 changes that I believe need to be made to Mario 64, and if you guys end up enjoying this video, consider leaving a like and a comment telling me that you did, and maybe I'll make videos like this in the future for Sunshine and Galaxy. And with that all being said, let's get started. Some of these changes I believe are relatively likely, and some not so much. The first change, this one I think most people are going to agree on, is that the camera of Mario 64 is outdated and needs to be changed. The controls of Mario 64 I'm also going to bundle into this spot. When you have technology that the Nintendo Switch has, where you have the ability to have two C-sticks, one that would obviously be used for controlling Mario and the other for a camera, there's no reason to carry over the original camera system of Mario 64. For the time it worked okay, but there are definitely issues with it if you were to carry it over now. And most people have played Mario 64 and at several points have had issues with a particular platforming challenge, not necessarily because of the difficulty of the challenge itself, but because of the position the camera is orientated in, that you can't see Mario very well, or at least can't see the platform that you're trying to jump to. It's an unnecessary component of challenge in the game, and I feel if the camera and the controls are modernized and fixed up, which I believe is a very likely change to happen, then I think Mario 64 will be a lot more appealing to a modern audience. Another change that I'd like to see that's relatively obvious is to upscale it to HD, but the rumors have said that these games are going to be coming to HD, so this change is almost certainly going to be put into effect. But the reason that I wanted to talk about it today is because of how specifically I think it should be implemented. An idea that I've seen some people throw out there, and I've thought about it myself, is what if Nintendo is going to upscale Mario 64 to HD but keep it in the original aesthetic? Keep Mario in that same model, just make all of the terrain HD. And that's not really what I want. Think the Mario 64 outfit that's in Odyssey. I don't really want to see a game completely in that style. That's why I'd like the game to look like Odyssey, but with all of that amazing content from Mario 64 in it, and then that would just create a wonderful blend. Have the aesthetics of Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxy, and Odyssey all look similar to one another to make it easier for people to go in and access these games and feel like, oh yeah, I've played something a lot like this before, just with a different moveset now and different worlds to explore. And when it comes to these worlds to explore, that leads to change number 3, and these are alterations that need to be made to the courses. These changes mainly have to do with more content being added in for people to do in order to increase the overall star total and playtime that people have with Mario 64, and to add more depth to each course. This could just be aesthetically, like a Rainbow Cruise for example, where if that was remastered to HD, it wouldn't really look that good in my opinion. So you'd obviously like to add some extra graphical touch-ups to make the course seem a little bit more coherent and realistic looking. I know this is a Mario game and realism isn't necessarily what should drive it, but it should look a little bit more realistic than just blocks floating in the air. And it could also stem to including enemies in places where there aren't really many enemies, and add an extra little challenge to certain areas in the game where there's not really that much to do. In terms of more content being added in, I'm talking about things like the silver stars that were introduced for Mario 64 DS. We're going to be touching on DS quite a bit today because this seems to be a remaster of the original Mario 64 and not of the remake that it's already had. So we don't necessarily know if DS content is going to be included in this game, but I would like content similar to what was included to add more stars in the game. A criticism of Mario 64 that's pretty valid is that there's only a few hours of playtime if you want to just breeze through the game, and if you want to 100% it, it's going to take a little bit longer, but there's still not as much playtime as you would experience in a modern Mario title. So adding some more challenges into the worlds that already exist would be a welcome change. In terms of how likely I think this is, I don't really know. Nintendo might not want to mess with it. But I mentioned some DS content, and change number 4 that I'd like to see is including the content that was made for the DS remake. I'm talking about the Goomba Poison World. That was probably the best new course introduced for DS, although there were a couple of other ones that could be included as well. And I would like to see the content that was introduced for Mario 64 DS be carried over as well, like the silver stars that I just mentioned. It added an extra 8th star to a lot of these courses, an extra challenge just to add a little bit more depth to the game. And maybe if you increase every course up to 10 stars, that could create a lot more content and a lot more replay value. After you breeze through the game in one run through, you could go back to each course and finish it all off, or you could go the approach where you clear one course entirely and then move on to the next one, whichever you prefer. Something else included in Mario 64 DS that I think is one of the more unlikely things to come back is the mini games. You know the ones. They were also included in New Super Mario Bros. DS if you're interested in that, but there are extra mini games that you could play and really made use of the Nintendo DS's technology. There were many multiplayer ones, many single player ones, almost all of them utilized both screens to the biggest potential, and I'd like to see something like that and actually a little bit of bonus content included in Mario 64 as a Switch remaster. This doesn't really have to do with the game itself, but it does have to do with something else that's pretty important, and it's providing people with a break to the game with something else to do inside of the game. If somebody gets tired of adventuring through a 3D Mario world, they could go play some mindless games just like they would do on their phone. Again, when you're trying to appeal to a more modern audience, maybe Nintendo thinks that attention span is something that needs to be addressed here, and little distraction mini games like this I definitely found fun to play when I got a little bit bored with what was going on in the game, and I think many people who played this modernly will find that to be the case as well. Do these minigames have to be the same as the ones included in Mario 64 DS? Absolutely not, and they can't really be without some major changes because, as I mentioned, they made a lot of good use out of the two-screen functionality of the DS. But some minigames that take advantage of the Switch's technology I think would be a great idea. Change number 5 is another feature from Mario 64 DS that I believe needs to come back, maybe slightly changed. This would be the Versus mode. Now, I don't know if full-on co-op multiplayer is really needed in an original remaster of Mario 64, and if there's any of these changes that I would be the most fine with not being included, it would probably be this one, because I don't feel it's really that necessary. Basically, what this Versus mode did is it allowed you to connect with people that were close to you, and you go through a specific location, find these silver stars, and collect the most of them. But Mario 64 is mainly designed as a single player experience, and this would be an extra thing added on that I don't know if Nintendo would really want to include. But since this was in DS, I don't see why it doesn't deserve to be included in this as well, albeit it's not that necessary. If this was to be implemented, I'd love to see more courses included so we have several more stages to play off of with it. And the last thing that I'd love to see come back from DS, the number 6 change on this list, is the multiple characters. This is a fairly controversial pick for a change from Mario 64 Remaster. There's a lot of people who like the game being a singular experience with Mario, but in my opinion, I love the ability to change between the different characters. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think it was one of the best changes from Mario 64 DS. A lot of people say it's Mario 64, you don't need these extra characters included. Okay, well then we don't need Luigi and Galaxy then. You see, it doesn't really make that much sense. Sure, you like having all the power-ups tied to just Mario, but I believe there's an appeal to going and changing your character based on what the course is, having a strategic mindset going into play a new level, a new mission. Some mission may require Wario, and Wario is probably the worst character out of the bunch, but because you require him, you get a chance to play a new character with a new feel. But there may be a mission that doesn't require Luigi, but you find he's probably the best character there, and the best character suited for that mission, so you'll go and choose him for that. Now, would I like to see a more convenient way to change between the multiple characters? Absolutely. I don't think you should have to go from the top floor all the way back down and go unlock the door with the key to change every single time. I feel there should be a shortcut for this. And maybe for the people who are really adamant about no multiple characters, you could include an option for them to turn that off. I just feel that bringing back the multiple characters will bring so much more personality to Mario 64, and it was one of the best features of the DS version. The number 7 change is a big one, and this is no longer kicking you out of courses. This is one of many people's biggest criticisms about Mario 64, the whole boot out system involved in the game. A lot of people feel that it takes you out of the immersion, that experience going through one singular world in Mario 64. You complete a mission and your reward is to get kicked out of the stage. I know this doesn't apply for the 100 coin challenge, but for almost every other challenge this applies, and in many situations it makes sense. But for the vast majority, I don't really think that it's that necessary. This would cause some problems for courses which change depending on the mission, like Whomp's Fortress for example, but they could easily be reworked, or maybe just only kick you out when it's absolutely necessary. This would shorten the playtime of the game, but if some of the previous changes come to fruition, like more missions being added into each course, it will likely make up for the shorter experience by kicking you out of these levels. Also have to factor in that this game is coming in a pack of 3, with Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy being included as a trilogy, so you're not just experiencing Mario 64 on its own. So if the game is made a little bit shorter, and this, by the way, would be made out of convenience by taking away one of the most inconvenient aspects of the game and adding more immersion to it, not only would make the experience of Mario 64 better, while it would make it faster, you still have 2 entire other 3D Mario games to play, so I don't think people would be that upset with that. For change number 9, this is somewhat related to what I was just mentioning, and this would be changing up the boss fights. I know there's already rematches with characters like King Bob-omb as well as Bowser, but considering that many of these bosses are really easy or not that innovative, they were innovative at the time, but compared to Mario games more modernly, they're not that innovative, and when remastering them for a modern audience, I would like to see some changes. Kind of like how in the throwback Galaxy and Galaxy 2 they changed up the Whomp King fight, maybe you could do some stuff like that here. Add a little bit more depth to these boss fights, because it's not 1996 anymore. These boss fights are so classic and great for the time, but I believe adding an extra little bit of flash and flair to these boss fights, kind of like they do with more modern Mario games, would make a lot of sense. You don't have to go too over the top with it. I'm not asking to completely strip away the concept of pounding the Whomp King on his back. But what I am asking for is a little bit more depth, a little bit more challenge being added into them, and I think that would be for the better. The last change I wanted to talk about is remastering the music of Mario 64 and adding some new tracks to it. When I think about what some of my favorite aspects are to Mario 64, the soundtrack is definitely up there. It's one of my favorite soundtracks in any video game, period. But the instruments are a little bit out of date, again, considering that Mario 64 is an older game that's released. We got to experience the OST on the Nintendo 64 and on the Nintendo DS, both platforms that aren't necessarily known for projecting the best sound. And when you're comboing this game in with Sunshine and Galaxy, both games from platforms that could output the sound better, then I think this game definitely needs to have its OST remastered so that a modern audience could experience the original vision for these tracks and how they help the world building for this game so much. It'll improve the already great soundtrack by making so many songs like Bob-omb Battlefield, one of the most classic songs in the entire Mario series, even better. But there is one more thing with this music section that I want to talk about, and it's that this legendary Bob-omb Battlefield theme is also used for 3 other courses. Whomp's Fortress, Tall Mountain, and Tiny Huge Island all use this Bob-omb Battlefield theme. And for those, either remaster the song in different ways, or maybe add some new songs in the original style. The song is great, yes, but I don't think we need to hear the exact same song on 4 courses. You could keep it the same, change up some instruments in it. Maybe for Tiny Huge Island, you could have a gimmick where when everything's huge, there's going to be more bass, and the song's going to be hitting you much harder. But when everything's tiny, the song is going to be lighter, and it's not going to go as hard. With many or all of these changes being implemented, whichever it ends up being, I believe Mario 64 will appeal very well to a modern audience, as long as it implements some of these key things. And maybe the magic that I experienced by playing Super Mario 64 for the first time, somebody else may have the pleasure of experiencing. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, if you want to see Sunshine and Galaxy videos in this style, leave a comment down below and a like on this video. And if you want to make sure you don't miss those videos if they come out, then consider subscribing and turning notifications on. I'll see you next time.